Hello, everyone in this webinar and on the screen, wherever you might be. Thank you very much for joining. With a very short notice, we put together an excellent panel of guests and speakers for tonight's little webinar. Many of us followed with a great concern the situation and the developments and the brutal attack on Kosovo police in the north of Kosovo on the 24th of September. And of course, we here now in Strasbourg and Brussels follow the situation very closely. We have put measures together, but of course there are a lot of question marks, especially towards the government of the government of Serbia, President Vučić and others. And to enlighten us a little bit, I have asked our speakers for tonight to give us a broad overview of how does the situation look like, first of all, from Pristina, from the situation of Kosovo, what had happened, what information are available. And I'm very glad that I could ask Agon Milici for tonight to be our first speaker, to give us a little introduction on what is on his perspective necessary to do, what is the biggest concern, of course, for Kosovo at the moment. And then we continue with Dragiša Mijajević. He is based now in Belgrade, but he's originally from the north of Kosovo. So I guess he has a little bit more insights on how does the situation in the north look like, what is from your perspective important, but also what kind of information maybe do we miss at the moment, where is some misinterpretation, where is a lot of speculation which cannot be confirmed and things like that. And I'm also extremely glad that Futura Kusari agreed to give us some more insights on the media situation. We know that it is extremely dangerous for many journalists to be active and to report from the north of Kosovo. And also there, I think we need to see what lessons could be learned and what else would be also requested from the European Union, from international actors to do to improve the situation for journalists, not just in the north, but especially now since we speak of the north. So not to give me the floor for more, I would ask Agon to start. I have asked all three speakers to limit themselves for 7-8 minutes for the first round. Then we have a Q&A, and everyone who is interested in raising questions and give us some Q&As, please do this in the form. We will try to stick to an hour, but if there are a couple of questions afterwards, we might have 5 or 6 minutes more. But I would say we start now with Agon's first input, please.
Thank you, Viola, and thank you for hosting this and for having your attention on the Balkans in this really, I would say, crazy times and worrying times. And I think this is very timely because this is not the end of things. There's a genuine fear that things might be worse, might get worse. I will start my presentation with outlining how things view from Pristina's perspective. What are the facts in a way? What is known to have happened? How people view what has happened? It is clear that this was an attempt by a structured, organized group that received substantial support from state structures in Belgrade to engage in the destabilization effort in Kosovo. The evidence is overwhelming on this, no matter how much Belgrade tries to find ways to distance itself from this. There is a clear evidence path linking things to Belgrade. Secondly, in Pristina, there's a wide discussion on what would be the aims. There's a lot of speculation of what was the aim of this. Most likely, at least my assessment is that the aim was to try to establish a new reality on the ground, create some sort of territory that is under the control of these groups, possibly open up weapon supplies channels, speculations also about potential false flag attacks. These are all like speculative in nature, but it was clear that this group of this size with those weaponry was planning for something bigger. The third fact is that it's clear that that group was prevented from doing that. Because obviously, they were caught earlier before establishing whatever they were trying to achieve, and that this was most likely the result of not just the Kosovo police action, but also intensive cooperation with NATO intelligence, which probably had information about what was going on. So this is, I would say, the view from Pristina. So, and this was very clear even early in the morning of the events. For example, the U.S. Embassy came out at almost 9 a.m. Outlining that this was an attempt by an organized group to cause regional destabilization. What has this produced domestically? How does it feel like? What are the impact? I would say that in Kosovo, this has created a bit of a reaffirmation of the Kosovo's sovereignty and territorial integrity in the way this destabilization attempt was managed. It has restored Kosovo's trust in its partners, especially on the US and Germany and the UK. It has it's increased trust in the capacity of police to deal with these kind of situations. There's a perception of a diplomatic win. And also, I think it has created a sense of legitimation of government policy so far and the government's discourse on how to handle the dialogue. So there's wide, I would say, public support on the government and how it's handling. And sort of the perception is that this kind of confirmed what they were saying all the time. I would worry. Secondly, I put a worrying sign on this. I think the euphoria in Pristina is a bit, and some wrong lessons are being learned. While this may seem like and it obviously is in many ways, the fact that this did not materialize in the way the group had planned is a win. We still have a problem. The North is still there. The Serbs are not integrated in it. Kosovo still remains without an effective EU and NATO path, so with the non-recognizers, and we cannot bypass the political process. This other reality, and I think Dragiša might also speak more from the North perspective on that, is that there's increased antagonism and distancing. The level of interethnic mistrust has grown, and the situation remains explosive. Now you have, in the North, a climate of legitimizing terrorist acts, in which these kind of actions are seen as justified and it doesn't take for many people to believe that, and it doesn't take for many people to engage in violence for violence to become a reality. So the fear is that this is not the last incident of this nature, and that if this time it was able to sort of end this way, there is no guarantee that the similar outcome will be in other times. So the feeling that I get is that there's an urgent need to establish some sort of deterrence first, and to restore some credibility to the political process, because there can only be a political way out of this. If not, then we are going into I said in short term new incidents, and in medium term this last turning the North into kind of a Belfast or Northern Ireland, of where it's a constant area of conflict and tension and antagonism. And I don't think we should afford ourselves the luxury of creating that context. So how to establish deterrence? I would suggest, especially for the EU side, this is extremely important. Measures need to be taken against Serbia. There is a clear footprint of this action being coordinated and instigated from Belgrade. People can talk as much as they want about internal scuffles or divisions within Serbia. That doesn't matter. The Serbian state should be held responsible for allowing, enabling, and creating the context in which this has happened, especially in the context where Kosovo has faced sanctions and measures for what EU has perceived as being destabilizing action. So if EU doesn't do something, it will not establish deterrence and will encourage further actions like this. And this deterrence is important not just for Kosovo, but also for Bosnia. This attitude of appeasement should end. The Russian blackmail of Serbia is no longer credible. Russia is no longer a partner credible for anyone, and the West should understand that and act from a position of strength. Secondly, deterrence should be strengthened with the increased presence of KFOR, not to do policing work. There's Kosovo police for that, but to have more effective control of the border and what goes in and what goes out. And third is to make a new push on the dialogue by looking at the asymmetries and sort of the guarantees. The more we have political agreements, the more we have tensions. There's a paradox in this. And there's a clear reason because there's the high level of mistrust between the parties, but most importantly, there's high level of mistrust in the mediators and the guarantees of the West. So if the parties believe that the mediators cannot enforce what is being agreed, we will continue to see this kind of behavior. So the mediators have to have a clearer guarantees, and let's hopefully see what happens in December with the enlargement. All of this has started because there is no EU enlargement like 10 years ago. So we need clearer messaging and a renewed kind of a push and a review of the dialogue framework from the West. And I will end. I don't want to talk much about Serbia, except for the fact that the EU should punish them. Because I do think, I don't want to become like the one who only looks at the other side. I would like to focus on what Kosovo can do at this moment. We should not afford ourselves the luxury of looking at this as sort of just, a win and that we dodged the bullet and that there should, now the dialogue can be bypassed. I do think the diplomatic moments should be used internationally, but also domestically to establish a genuine communication with Kosovo Serbs. Because if the North is in the position it is right now, if Radovic is no longer there physically as an element, now would be the perfect time to try to work with Kosovo Serbs and to build bridges and to find a way to prevent further escalations. The president of Kosovo has offered a pathway to this. She has said that, recommended that Kosovo move ahead with presenting a draft of the ASM and work with the US on this, making sure that the ASM is within Kosovo's sort of constitutional framework. I think that would send a positive signal at this moment. I think if the mayors in the North would resign, this would send another positive signal at this moment because it would create the opportunity for Kosovo Serbs to show up in elections and address one of the main concerns that has been over the last year. And it would put the pressure on Vučić. If I was Kosovo right now, I would put the pressure on Vučić, because obviously he is in I would describe his position as being in the West's mercy right now. And, Kosovo has not much to fear. Its partners have shown that they're committed to its sovereignty and territorial integrity. What Kosovo needs to do is to just, remove some of these obstacles to the political process and go on the offensive. If Vučić continues to create problems, and I'm pretty sure he will, then that will be the Vučić's problem with the West. Kosovo cannot afford to hold that burden, but it needs to work with Kosovo Serbs. It needs to work with its partners to get out of this, because the problem is still there, and we should not be captured by this mood of euphoria. We need to, this is an avoidable conflict, I would say, and we need to look at all possible ways to do that. So. And just the last point, we cannot lose this geopolitical momentum, because if this is not resolved in the next year, we have a new geopolitical context in place next to 1 year or two, US elections all over Europe, which brings in a lot of new uncertainties. So if we don't use this moment, I fear we leave a very, very delicate environment in place. So I would end with that. Thanks, Fyodor.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. Thank you very much for this very energetic, but also very, very constructive, not just outlook, but also concrete steps, what could be done from our side, from the Kosovo side, and how to deal with this, with the current situation. So, Dragiša, from your side, from the north of Kosovo, and maybe from some more, how much Belgrade is involved or not involved, and how much this speculation has ground. Please enlighten us a bit.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me and for having this opportunity to talk on this very sensitive topic in very difficult times. So I have to say that this was a really very bad incident that happened in the north, and it really struck us all, no matter from which community we are coming. It was not something that we haven't been expected to happen, but we really didn't. It is always you expect something to come, and we've been talking a lot that this might happen, but you are never prepared for such a thing. Me personally, I have to say a few words about myself, just not to be. I have a feeling that you will disagree hearing something from me, but just to clarify my thoughts from the very beginning. And from the very beginning, I would like to say that I'm not a man of violence. I'm a man of peace, and I've always been a man of peace for last 25 years, while I'm dealing with the issue of Kosovo-Serbia dialogue and dialogue between two communities. And I've been condemning the killing of the Kosovo policeman the very first moment I've heard about on that sad Sunday morning next week. And here, why I'm saying this, because please keep the open-minded with me. There are two key issues. One key issue is what happened, and second key issue is why this happened. And let's focus first on the first question: what happened? And whether this was the attack to Kosovo police, or whether it was an incident on the barricade, and we don't know. What we know is that the armed group of the Serbs, led by Milan Radojičić, happened to be that morning in Banjska. We also saw some footages, etc. The first thing is whether these Kosovo policemen, whether they were killed or they were in a close combat, or they died or killed by activating the bomb. And we know that the Serbs from this incident, they were shot by they were killed by sniper long-range shooting. So we don't know what I'm trying to say here. We don't know whether there were combating operations between two groups, because from the footage that we saw, there are no any combats. We see only on these footages some people sitting in a corner of one building having a beer. Nobody is watching nobody is shooting, nobody is watching, nobody is doing anything. The second thing is that they have a plenty of weaponry, and they're not using to protect themselves. They're not using to protect, to defend themselves or to protect the ones who are already injured. So it is very, in that sense, what really happened. It's really strange. It is not that I'm trying to undermine this incident whatsoever. These guys are armed in northern Kosovo. They shouldn't be armed. They shouldn't be doing whatever they're doing. But whether we are having a terrorist group who is attacking police, or we are having a smuggling group who is smuggling the weaponry. Why that question is important? Because if these guys are terrorists, then the more guys like them are coming. And that is one of the key questions. Is this the event that will put an end to this kind of incidents, or we are just at the beginning of this kind of incidents in the future? So, as I said, a lot of things we still don't know. There is an investigation going on in Pristina. We saw also in Belgrade. There will be push from the international community, and we have to get the answers on this, on what was happened in Banjska event. The second question is why this happened? Why now? I guess we have two different realities of this. for me, I've been talking about special police force being deployed in the north 2 years already, building the bases on the military bases, building the on the confiscated land against the law on expropriation, and doing the community policing. They were doing they have permanent presence in the north, and we all know, we are not physicists, but we know the Newton's third law on motion, which says that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And boy, oh boy, we have been talking a lot about the action of the special police forces, and there was no reaction. There was no reaction whatsoever. They've been shooting in the north, they've been beating in the north, these policemen were behaving inappropriate in the north, and nobody reacted. So that is on one side. On the other side, how the Serbian community reacted, mainly peaceful. But there were some elements in Serbian community who thought they can do it also, they can, by the strength of the weaponry, they can change the situation. And we all know, let's be honest, that there are some arms going around on these barricades. Even last year in July, we had last year in December, we knew that there were some group of armed people being present and being visible on the barricades and showing themselves in these kind of surroundings. So what's happened? It happened that we tolerated the violence in the north. That is what happened. And when I say we, I said everyone, including international community, including ULEX and KFOR and everyone else. And since we tolerated this in the era when we had the war in Ukraine, that's why it's happened an incident like this in Banjska. So now the key question is, are we going to tolerate more violence in the north or not? And the key question is, are we going to pressure both governments to find a political solution, or we will see these kind of incidents more in the north? And I think that the only one solution is a political solution. We can fight with each other, we can kill each other, we can do whatever, but at the end of the day, we have to find a political solution. And I believe now is the time to find a political solution. I've been talking for the 25 years about that, but now is also geopolitical momentum to find a political solution. So this is the way how we should proceed. We should proceed back to the negotiating table, putting a pressure for both sides. No violence in the north. If we have the violence in the north, and we have everyday violence in the north, there will be no political solution. And there will be more incidents like this. So either one or another one. And that is the question. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. And you know that last time I went to Kosovo, I made myself very unpopular with exactly your argumentation. And I had a hard time since then, but I still think that you are right. And we need to find ways how to overcome this and how to find political solutions. But I mean, I have seen this special Kosovo police in a normal neighborhood, and they almost killed me for saying this, but you could have asked other police forces, civil police forces there, and not special police forces. And of course, that creates a reaction. But nevertheless, I would say the hard attacks, the brutal attacks on the 24th, with this heavy weaponries, with the heavy armed vehicles, with this mass of ammunition, it's a bit, how to say, delicate to interpret this as a reaction to the deployment of the Kosovo police. But I don't want to discuss this now.
No, I want just 1 minute. Just 1 minute.
Please.
one thing is the policemen that you saw in front of the very building of the municipal building in Zvečan, they're still over there. So your question is still valid. And the second thing, as I said, I condemn the attack in Banjska.
I know.
I condemn the attack in Banjska. I never said this is a solution, and I'm really sincere in that. So, but I'm saying that I'm afraid that if we are not going to solve this issue, we will have more incidents like this, and it will be more deadly than this one. Thank you.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Before we start discussing amongst each other, and there are also already 3 questions in the chat, I would like to ask Flotura to come into this and describe a little bit the situation from the media perspective, from the journalist perspective, and what would be important to guarantee their safety so they can report from there without fear.
Yes, thank you very much, Viola. It's a pleasure to be invited, and also thank you very much for the work you do for us, for Kosovo. I had in mind to start my presentation with a general remark, which is about democracy and how important it is to have the 4 pillars working properly: the legislative pillar, the executive pillar, the judicial pillar, and also the 4th pillar, which is media and journalists. But I changed my mind after hearing Dragisha speaking so passionately about what is happening there. And what he said, which was a lot of things which are not factually correct, made me just think how important it is to have journalists covering what is happening in North, but journalists covering in general what happens in the world, but particularly how important it is to have journalists covering that region, because it's the only way for us to see what is happening and to make our own judgment based on what we see, based on what local people say, based on facts, videos, voices, etc. Now, 2 things as a short reaction to Dragisha on things that are, for me, unacceptable. And it's not that I intend to enter into this discussion with you, Dragisha, because I want to talk about media freedom. But first, I am a bit shocked when you refer to killing of a police officer as an incident. In my world, I'm a lawyer by profession, we refer to falling from a bike as an incident, but not to killings of police officers. You have the right to say that. I respect it, but I strongly disagree. I think that was an act of terror that happened, and I think police officers in all countries should not be killed, should not be wounded, and should not be victims. Secondly, on the second part, what you address basically is you started by saying you don't want to justify what happened, and then you said a lot about violence from Kosovo police. And I don't know, facts don't speak, facts are not on your side in terms of violence. And what we've seen in the north, especially in May, is the biggest number of attacks against Kosovo Albanian journalists that has ever happened since after the war in Kosovo. We had around 30 attacks on media workers, on operators, journalists. Their cameras were attacked. And so far, we haven't seen any reactions, especially from Serbian authorities. We've seen in footages masked men, a lot of them speaking in Serbian, because this is what what journalists testified. And so far, we haven't seen any denunciation. We haven't seen any reaction. We haven't seen anyone from either Serbia or maybe locals. And I do apologize if any of you reacted in protection of Kosovo Albanian journalists, especially those very difficult days. But I think this is what should happen. When you have cases, when journalists who are working in terrible conditions because of threats, physical threats that happen in the north, I think what should happen is all of us coming together and helping them. And let me very briefly mention what happened in the recent months. So we've had, as I said, the biggest number of attacks on journalists. It has become a very dangerous profession. Now, we know from the report of Media Freedom Rapid Response, which is one of the biggest coalition of international NGOs, which issued a report about Serbia, condemning the way journalists are treated there and how media freedom is undermined. And in the report, it says that Serbia is one of the most dangerous countries to do journalism after Ukraine. And unfortunately, we're seeing now also extending to north because of course, we're in border, and that is also what is happening. And I think, of course, fully agree with Dragiša on one sentence against the violence. And I think we should all be careful to make sure that journalists are allowed to do their job. Otherwise, we will end up with statements from different governments. It doesn't matter whether it's Kosovo government or Serbian government telling us what is happening there. We should make sure that they are able to do their job. And I have to say, there are situations where I'm critical about authorities in Kosovo, but there is a particular support that journalists got during this summer from the Ministry of Internal Affairs. So journalists now have helmets and vests, and it's terrible that we're talking about this in 2023 in Kosovo, but they need helmets and protective vests, and they do have now that. And we managed to bring this from international partners due to licenses that we got from the Ministry of Internal Affairs, who reacted very, very quickly. Now, what needs to happen in the future is that we need better coordination internally, especially between law enforcement forces, judiciary, prosecution, so that journalists, are prepared a little bit better how to protect themselves, but also when incidents happen to have more effective investigations, although this is very, very difficult. And I will conclude this part of intervention to say that we should leave aside our differences, and it doesn't matter whether someone in the north is an Albanian, Serb, or other community. When we see a journalist, when we see a camera operator, we should all protect them, because they speak on our behalf, they inform the public, and it's the only way to get factual information. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Dragiša, you want to react to this once?
I really would appreciate if you give me just 2 minutes.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
I appreciate Vittoria's comments, but I don't know why she is addressing to me. I was condemning the attack on journalists on when it happened. I was finding my email via my tweet from 18 of June when it happened, and I clearly condemn that no violence is accepted, including violence on journalists. That's one thing. The second thing is why Serbia didn't react, because I don't want to justify the acts of the government of Serbia whatsoever. I'm not a government official, I'm a policy analyst, but these events happened in northern Kosovo, and Kosovo government reacted by arresting many people for this. So definitely Serbian government should say a word that attack on journalists is unacceptable. I agree on that, but to act with some legal measures, since Kosovo is another jurisdiction, I really don't see how that can happen in this. But speaking about the facts that are not supporting the violence of the brutality of police force in the north, I mean, you really, if you read any newspaper every day, you will see a lot of evidences. You know, there was on 11th of April, for instance, there was a shooting on a guy who was passing by Bistrica Bridge. And it was shooting by a special policeman, and the Kosovo police Kosovo police denied involvement in the morning, and then during the day they said it is a policeman who did it, and they arrested like 4 guys, etc. And I know the guy who actually shot this sir passing by. And today, by preparing for this meeting, I saw this guy hiking on the mountains of Kosovo. So that is the democracy that we've been promised. You know, on Monday, I spoke with 3 guys who were heavily beating up in Zubin Potok, close to my hometown. I knew one of them, and I spoke with him, and he says, "Look, the guy started crying. He's in his 30s. The guy start crying, and he says, it's not that I'm only beaten, I'm humiliated, because they were going to cut the woods. A lot of this is really poor people. They survived by wood cutting, and they went to forest cutting woods, and then special police force found them and beat them, and they were really mentioning some bad words to them, etc. So the guy was crying to me on the phone when I spoke with him a couple of days ago. And there are plenty of these kind of incidents. And I know that this is, of course, you can't hear in Pristina, and you don't need to trust to me, really. Just go to the north. Just go and see yourself. You really don't take my words whatsoever. I'm not want to convince you in anything. Just go and see yourself. And just go and speak with people, not with me. Speak with anyone. And then you will see completely different story than you can hear in Pristina's news. But again, this doesn't justify what happened in Banjska, because what happened in Banjska is absolutely unacceptable, and we have to do everything, these kind of incidents, not to repeat again. And I would like really to be clear on that. The violence has to stop. We need to negotiate about political solution, not to discuss how we are going to start a new war. And that is, at least to me and to many people I know, it is unacceptable.
Thank you for elaborating a bit more and very precise what you meant, and I fully understand what you say. And the problem is that is also, I think, part of the problem of the dialogue, that actually the face-to-face conversation between people from the north and Pristina or the other part of Kosovo has not really taken place, and many people from the south of IBA have never been to the north, and vice versa, and so that does not make the life easier for many people there to understand each other, not learning each other's languages and so on. So I know I'm very touched when I'm there, and when I try to translate what's happening, because it's not really wanted by the other side to be understood, and that really let my heart bleed. Agon, you want to react? Otherwise, I would propose, we have a couple of questions already in the chat. Some are for me myself, but maybe you can try to look. I mean, the punitive measures on Kosovo are still relevant. Should the criteria for the removal be changed and updated? Is the first one. The second one here from Festim is, can it be any punitive measures against Serbia? If yes, when and how? I mean, I don't know, Agon, you want to pick on them, and otherwise I would go take this one later. And the third question is explicitly to me, and then there is maybe a question from Bezat. Maybe Dragisha could pick this. The second one is the attack on Banjska, the introduction to the division of Kosovo. That's my interpretation. We had already the question of a land swap that was denied or rejected at that time, especially the Chancellor Merkel was very outspoken. But here the question is, wouldn't that the best case scenario, where we both, as Kosovo and Serbia, finally move on and establish the new border along Iber? Isn't the cost of non-solving the dispute between Kosovo and Serbia higher than just accepting the realities on the ground and proceed with the partition? So maybe Agon first, and then Dragisha, and then I would say something regarding the punitive measures.
Yes, sure. I just looked at the question. There was also a question on the ASM as by Michael Roberts saying that basically doesn't this attack confirm Kurti's fears about the ASM? So I'll maybe touch upon that a little bit and some of these questions, but also reflect on what was discussed earlier. I do think what is important to highlight, and I'm trying to listen and understand as much as I can, because from the perspective from the north, even when I disagree deeply, I'm trying to understand, because I think it's our responsibility as a majority to kind of look into that, because we have a responsibility as a majority. I do think what is really important at this moment, if Kosovo Serbs, especially in the north, want to have a future in Kosovo, there's fundamental importance to restore agency in everything that is happening, because I don't think their best interests are being served either by Belgrade nor by organized crime groups. So, if we would have authentic voices from the north articulating these and participating, and I would emphasize the statement today by the U.S. ambassador to Kosovo, who basically said clearly, Kosovo Serbs need to realize and finally accept that they will be living in Kosovo as part of Kosovo society. I do think that is fundamentally important, because then that would create the space. Currently we're in this situation of this mutual hostage situation in which, Kosovo Serbs are in a way hostage to also Kosovo's international standing, which is blocked by Serbia, and hence Kosovo Serbs are seen in a way as an instrument of Serbia. So we are both holding each other hostage. I think, this starts by Kosovo Serbs accepting that they will be living in Kosovo as a state and participating in its institutions. This started when Kosovo Serbs withdrew from these institutions and creating this vacuum which these police forces had to fill. I do agree that it's unpleasant and it's bad that Kosovo state is there present only with police. That is not a pleasant posture, but some of these functions have to be done. As this attack proved, there needs to be somebody to deal with these kind of situations. But from our side, from Kosovo side, this is not the only thing that should be there. The political messaging should be clear, to Kosovo Serbs on their future. And, I do think this is where our government has failed, is trying to work with and create partners who have agency within Kosovo and in the north, to then be able, and also have legitimacy in the north, to start working with them in this. This is where I think there has been a failure on our side. I do think we need to also work on this issue of mistrust and on this issue of the climate of fear. Yes, I understand it's there might be police overreactions in a lot of cases, and as I said, it's not pleasant. On the other hand, you can see a clear interest from Belgrade to fuel this narrative of Serbs being under threat and Kosovo doing ethnic cleansing. And that creates this sense of insecurity that fuels it even more. So a lot of these incidents are sometimes overblown, and so I'm not saying that these don't happen. I know that the police, because they're also scared there. A lot of these policemen, are in a hostile environment where people don't like them. So they're also scared, and I don't think that this is a very healthy environment. That's why I insist as well that we have a political solution to this, which brings back local Serbs as policemen to at least do the basic community level policing. On the question of punitive measures, I will just make a general remark. The French-German proposal was based on these ideas that, the sides will behave well, and if they don't, they will be punished or rewarded. I do think a lot of emphasis that we put on punishments, especially on Kosovo side, and I don't think this will work. I do think now is the time to emphasize rewards and for good behavior, and hopefully the new enlargement messaging will be clearer in this regard. Whereas for Serbia's case, I do think that if now there's a standard for punishing sides that take unilateral or destabilizing actions, if now, I will repeat again, if there are no measures taken against Serbia, I do think this will embolden and new actions of this nature again. The last comment on the ASM, because there was a question on whether this confirms Kurti's fears. I would say it's actually the opposite. I would say that there's absolutely reason for Kosovo to have worries about what the nature of the ASM will be. And the problem is that we have never seen a document so far. We don't even know what we're talking about, to be honest. What we do know is that there's a constitutional court decision that kind of laid out what it can't be. And I think Kosovo should feel comfortable in going with that. And if now we have an element like Radojcic, who is basically removed from the picture as a problematic actor, now that gap has to be filled. I'm going back to where I started, with local Serbs who want to be part of the institutions. And if the ASM is, if whatever is currently available in Kosovo's framework is not enough, what are those things that the ASM can do? But it will have to be Kosovo Serbs who raise these issues, who are part of this process, and not Belgrade, because the more Belgrade gets involved, the more this will be seen as a threat from Pristina, the more Kosovo Serbia will be seen as an instrument of Belgrade, and the more there will be resistance to the ASM. So key message: restoring agency for Kosovo Serbs. There are Kosovo Serbs living in the south for a while now. In the very non-ideal circumstances, I would agree. There's a lot of problems there as well. There's a lot of problems for everyone in Kosovo, including myself. I feel myself as a minority in a lot of issues, in how poorly our state performs. But they have found a way to live side by side with Albanians and find ways to cooperate. I do think this is possible in the north, but it will only be possible if Kosovo Serbs in the north restore their agency and do not work under the dictate of Belgrade or organized crime groups. And if the Kosovo government then works with these voices or amplifies these voices or tries to reach out to these voices. And I think this is a part where I want to be critical to our government, in that I don't think that they have done this. So I think I haven't done it enough. So I think there is a large part of responsibility on Kosovo's side as well.
Who would like to pick up some more questions before I maybe go for some of the questions which are directly addressed to me? Dragiša first and then Futura, or vice versa?
There is no interest about media freedom and journalists, which is okay. I'll just say some concluding remarks in the end, so feel free, Dragiša and Viola, to respond.
Okay, Dragiša, please.
Well, just to go through some of these questions. But the key point here for me, if you're looking for a political solution, and I feel like I have to say this, the key question is whether we are going to have Serbs in Kosovo as a political factor, or we are not going to have them in Kosovo. What does it mean? My parents will stay to live in Kosovo no matter what. And there will always be a teacher and a mailman and a few other guys. But the key question here, are we going to have the Serbs as a political factor, or we are not going to have them? And the second question is, if the Serbs are political factor, are they jeopardizing the Kosovo democracy, or they are not? Are they threatening the central institutions, or they are not? And these are the metrics where we have to find a solution. And the solution has to be a power sharing model where everyone feels accommodated to the full extent of their rights. And if Serbs are not accommodated with their rights, they will just leave. And if the Serbs leave, especially under these circumstances, Serbia will never recognize Kosovo. And if Serbia will never recognize Kosovo, Spain will never recognize Kosovo, and Kosovo will never enter to the NATO and to Euro-Atlantic integration, etc. So we have to find a deal which accommodates everyone. There was this notion of partition or whatever was the idea about division or exchange territories, etc. In this modality, it was a very pragmatic modality. Okay, we will take one part, I don't know, Kosovo North or whatever. There were plenty of ideas were floating around. So we will expel Serbs from Kosovo, and then Kosovo will remain like a full-fledged Albanian land, and Serbia will restore some of these lands. But is it good for the future of Kosovo, and is it good for the future of Serbia? And especially, is it good for Kosovo Albanians? Me personally, I think it is not. Kosovo Albanians need to have Serbs in Kosovo. That is for the best of their interests. But these Serbs of Kosovo should not be troublemakers. So let's make a plan which divides the jurisdictions, which doesn't interfere to each other's businesses, which has the central institutions that works for everyone. And let's take this opportunity of Euro 2030, which is a small window for all of us, but it's a big opportunity. And if it is a big opportunity, and if we lose it now with this Banjska kind of stuff, we will lose not one, at least 2, 3, 10 generations we will lose. So now is momentum. Are we going to fight for a peace? Are we going to fight for a future? Or we are going to go back into the conflict, into animosities, and we will lose this train. And I'm quite sure this train will come because of the Ukraine. Ukraine will be there for sure. European Union should give the opportunity for the Western Balkans. So now is the time to sit down, to make a good deal that will accommodate everyone, and to look into cooperation. Because so far we have Belgrade and Pristina confronting each other. And they have to believe that if they work with each other, it will be for the benefit of all. And that's the problem, because they're working against each other, they're not working together. And that is the key role of the negotiators, to present them the benefits of the process. And there are a lot of benefits of the process. They are really huge ones. But somehow they are all talking about differences, and they're all talking about what they will lose, not what they will get.
Agisha, I have one question, because what Agon said, I think, was absolutely rightly. And that is one question which really drives me through some sleepless night. I mean, what we see in the north is a very, how to say, a very unsatisfactory situation, apart from the killing and from the terrible attacks on the 24th. I mean, if there are any independent candidates, political candidates, independent political actors, they always face such a blackmailing pressure whatsoever. Most of them pull out because the pressure on the families is so high that they can't stand it. So what we see is this Srpska lista, and nobody knows how much credibility they really have, but they are obviously very much supported by Belgrade, and it can't be in the interest of the civilians, of the citizens in the north, to have such a tool coming from Belgrade to how to say, to steer or to govern their life. And so how is that possible? How much can we support? How much can also maybe Pristina help to really establish an independent group of people, a critical group of people, not set up by Belgrade, but set up by the citizens of the north, who have a certain level of credibility, but who are also willing to solve the problem and not to steer in more of this fuel which you were talking about and also Agon was talking about. Who could this be?
Well, I think that is, your assessment is, well, your thinking is interesting, but it doesn't have reality on the ground. And let me explain you why. Because now this is the momentum. Why this is a momentum? Because one of these key guys, Milan Radojičić, is definitely out of the game. He's definitely out of the game. And we will see how Vučić will react in a political sense for the Serbs in Kosovo, including South and the North. Because if the whole cooperation in the South is not genuine, if Srpska lista pull out in Srpska lista is also running all these 6 municipalities in the South as well. It is just that they have different interests in the north and the south. But what I'm trying to say, excluding Belgrade from this equation will not work. We have to make Belgrade to work together in order to make situation in the north workable and politically viable. But if you think that we can create a group of intellectuals or politicians from the north who will create a genuine Serbian policy in Kosovo, that doesn't work. The second thing is, where are the resources? You know, you go to election and you're signing a social contract. And in this particular case, 80% of people from the north and 80% of people generally in Kosovo, Serbs, they live from Belgrade. They receive all the subsidies from Belgrade. They don't receive subsidies and salaries from the south. And plus, education is in the hands of Belgrade, health, etc. You know, it is what you get from Kosovo and what you get from Serbia is not comparable. It's absolutely not comparable. So in that sense, we have to make Belgrade and push Belgrade to work towards a peaceful solution and to believe in a solution that is going to be created. And we have to create a solution that works for everyone. If we just believe that we will create, I don't know, some local Serbs who will take the action, people will leave. They will not stay in Kosovo. And that will be bad for everyone.
Yes, very interesting assessment. Even I had hoped we could come to a different answer, a different solution. So, but nevertheless, here are some more questions. How do you view the diplomatic messaging by American diplomats, especially Christopher Hill, who has not condemned the attack, or not that I'm aware of? To be honest,
he did.
He did.
Let's say he did. So full stop. He did condemn. He was quite clear in that. So he did it. I think the first day there was a conference where he was really clear about that.
Okay, then we have the panelists asked to have a view on the Serbian Orthodox Church, more generally on the political impasse, security situation, that on the attack itself. Please, I don't know, maybe both of you, Agon and Dragiša?
I can, while Agon is reading the question, I can say just in 2 sentences, the Serbian Orthodox Church was really proactive on the day they condemned the attack. On the very first moment, they've been tweeting and sending the press releases on that. It was, for them, it was really difficult. It was extremely difficult, having in mind everything else that was happening around the church. And that was really unfortunate that happened to them, but they, at least to me, I think they played quite a good role in these sorts of events.
I think they were actually the first ones coming out with a very lengthy press release condemning the violence, what happened. And I mean, I was surprised how clear they were in their formulation with.
But they knew how sensitive it was and what will be the reaction in the media. So they really, from the very first moment, they were quite transparent about this.
But once again, I think the question was not related to the attack. How would you see the Serbian Orthodox Church in a more general sense? I mean, are they helpful or are they rather...
Look, if you read the messages that the Patriarch of Serbian Orthodox Church sent in Peja, where he was coronated over there, those were the best messages any public figure sent in terms of reconciliation. So I was there physically present, and I was really happy to hear. There was also a mayor of Peja, Peć at that time. It was really a good message, but sometimes these messages also are not, let's say, focusing on reconciliation. You know, churches has very strong opinion about the final status of Kosovo. Let's be honest on that. and so there are more. If they are saying about the peace and reconciliation, I'm quite clear in that. They support that, but if we are saying if they support Kosovo as an independent state, it is definitely that's not. The church is also doing a lot of good work with school kids from surrounding municipalities and with a lot of other stuff. So there are plenty of really good work of the church in Kosovo. Maybe it's not visible in Albanian media, but just follow their website. They're really doing some really nice and great stuff with Albanian kids.
Agon, how about you? Maybe you pick 1-2 questions and then we do a final round, because I know that Flutura needs to leave in a couple of minutes.
Just on the church's role, I do think some of the statement of that day were helpful a little bit, in the sense of, confirming that an armed group was present there. And, I think it also helped public opinion in Serbia in understanding in what was happening as well. I do, though, have worries about, the fact that monasteries, are used, willingly, unwillingly. Someone might even want to do it willingly to put them at risk. Why are their weapons there? Like, it's a matter of concern. Secondly, these statements, and this is referred to not just Orthodox Church, but also again to the Kosovo Serbs. I would link these statements, in which they say that they object to Kosovo's independence or recognition and things like that. I don't think they're helpful at all. Some would say, well, you should not expect anything different from the Serbian Orthodox Church. Well, as a secular state, I think we have the right to, hold anyone accountable, and it's completely unacceptable for an entity, a religious entity, to make political statements of that nature, and to so I don't think we should be shying away from criticism of their role in making political statements. So it's absolutely unhelpful, and it was absolutely unhelpful in the way they lobbied against Kosovo's membership in UNESCO, for example. They should raise whatever concerns they have with Kosovo's authorities. And I will link this again to the issue of Kosovo Serbs realizing and accepting that they will live in Kosovo, and that includes the church. And Dragiša mentioned, yes, issue of power sharing and rights, and he framed it in a way that I find a little bit problematic, in the sense that if we don't get that, then you don't get recognition. I don't think in this climate this kind of framing will work. I do think this is why the dialogue is stuck, because in Kosovo side people fear that once we do the ASM, Serbia will again not unlock Kosovo. And that we are sort of stuck in this sort of, and I do think this atmosphere where an ethnic minority, in a way, has the ability to hold the majority hostage internationally, whereas we as a majority have the ability to kind of hold the minority hostage with the security measures, is really producing this dynamic. So I think both of the things have to happen at the same time. So Kosovo's international unlocking and the issue of Kosovo Serb rights at the same time. Which means the agreement has to be implemented, without these sequencing kind of elements, but everything at the same time, to eliminate these fears of mutual, keeping each other mutually hostage. So, I think this is a very important, power sharing, in Kosovo Serbs, and I know this is too much to people mention this all the time, but high levels of power at municipal level, wide representation in government, guaranteed representation, sort of neutral symbols, bilingualism. I know all of these are implemented very poorly, but I don't think it's only Kosovo's fault why they are. I do think we share a lot of the blame, but I don't think Belgrade actively has worked through years in preventing Serbs from doing that. I do think now is the final time for Kosovo Serbs to restore agency and insist to both sides that if this has to work, there needs to be two to tango, and that it only damages them if it doesn't work. So insist again, the political solution is possible to integrate some of these elements that Dragiša mentioned of health, education that operate currently informally if the ASM is a way to kind of integrate them into the current Kosovo framework, then I do think our government should not fear these kind of elements, the soft elements of the ASM. But I do think that it will be problematic if it moves into harder security elements and things like that, because then it will kind of fuel these fears on the Kosovo side on why this ASM is being asked and what's the intention of it. So I derailed a little bit. I might actually say this might be my final remarks as well. So because I don't think I have any more points to say, and I'll hand it to Flutura for her final.
Super. Then Flutura, before I close here, it's your final remarks.
Maybe I also need a final remark.
Gisela, you might want to respond also to some of my comments, so save it for later, and then you respond to all of our comments.
Okay, super.
Viola, it was a reminder. This event was a reminder of how important it is to speak to each other, because I think by sharing knowledge and facts and what we know, we help each other. For example, Dragisha started by saying there is so much violence from Kosovo police that, trying to justify, and then he mentioned one example, which is...
I can give you hundreds of examples.
Which is basically a confirmation of how important it is to have journalists reporting. And my second point is connected to this, because I think one of the biggest achievements of Kosovo, because of support of international community, is civil society and media. We have independent journalists which go to North and to other venues and report what is happening, most of them being women, in a very independent and professional way. This is how we are informed and we know what is happening there. And of course, it's a very cute argument to say you need to be physically in one place to get to know what is happening. But it's an argument that does not fly, because I don't have to be in US to understand what Biden is doing, or in Slovakia, whether Fico will create a government or not. What we need is independent journalists, and really, it's something that I'm proud of. And also I want to mention, because we're talking about relations with Serbia, I also want to say how important it is to support those very few independent journalists in Serbia. They do exist, they are there, and they're operating in very bad conditions. And finally, I'm in Latvia, in Riga. Tomorrow, the Council of Europe is launching the biggest safety of journalists campaign in the last 30 years. It will last for 5 years, and I think this is a good momentum for Kosovo and Serbia authorities to sit in their own countries and to make sure that there are safety measures to protect their own journalists. There is a lot to do to be in line with Council of Europe standards. Serbia has an obligation, being a member. Hopefully, Kosovo will be a member, so those obligations will also be important for us. So I think it's a good momentum to think of journalists and how to protect them. Thank you very much again for this event. It was excellent.
Well, thank you. Dragisha, you want the floor for 1-2 minutes? Because
I want to just my
please.
final remark.
Final.
When we talk about Kosovo, are we talking about Albanian country, Albanian state, or we are talking about country of its citizens? The constitution says Kosovo is a country of its citizens with three official languages: Serb, Albanian, and English. So what kind of discussion is majority, minority, who is minority, who is majority? In my hometown, I'm a majority for last 1,000 years. So either we are having a power sharing mechanism where everyone will accommodate itself to the fullest extent of their rights, or we as a minority, we will not stay in Kosovo because we don't want to fight for the minority rights, whether some Albanian will decide, should I go to this school or to that school? After so many years of atrocities between Albanians and Serbs. So the key question is, are we going to create a multi-ethnic society where everyone is having a right of in their jurisdictions on a European model? You have plenty of European models where it works perfectly. You have plenty of world models where everything works perfectly. Or we are going with the boots on the ground to change the reality imposing some laws, imposing some order, imposing some issues, not on the benefits of the local population. So that is the key question. My final question is no violence, no Banjska anymore. This was very bad from the very beginning. Somebody to think that can change the reality with the weapons. But on the other side, we need a political solution that will satisfy all the communities in Kosovo, including the Serbs. Thank you.
Thank you a lot. So regarding the question of the punitive measures, these are not sanctions which have been not by the parliament, not by the commission, but set up by the council. So also, please make sure that whenever you speak about sanctions, this is not about sanctions. There was mainly because most of, I think it was unanimous decision in the council, were really unhappy about the non-progress of the dialogue. While we are speaking now about a complete different setup, what I've heard is that there will be quite adequate, appropriate measures against Serbia, also not sanctions, so that would in this case be set up by the commission and not approved by the council. So there is no chance for a veto by an individual member state. This is at least what I've heard. So no saying by Hungary or any other friend of Vučić. And yes, it is in our interest to make sure that there is a clear, transparent investigation, there's a prosecution, that we get all the facts which are necessary to understand what actually was going on and things like that. We need, and we would like to see the full cooperation of everyone in Belgrade. That, I think, is one of the preconditions, and this is in our all interest. Regarding the European parliaments and maybe European institutions as such, I think we need a critical review of the dialogue, why things are stuck and at a stalemate, why we have this lack of progress, what is the political interest of actors not to move, and that is for sure, Agon has mentioned, the mediators' credibility is extremely low or are extremely low. And there's a lot of discussion how to change this. I see actually that we have now, as all of you have mentioned, diplomatic momentum. This could be used, hopefully, in a way which then we can start or see a resumption, hopefully soon. I have heard there are some initiatives, but let's wait and see how successful they might be. But believe we have all an interest to see Kosovo to become a member of the European Union as soon as possible. And Flutura has mentioned the Council of Europe. There is a report being written at the moment by 2 rapporteurs. We expect the outcome and the finalized report by the end of October, beginning of November. And this then will be crucial for the decision next May. If it can work next May, it would be extremely fast. Normally it takes at least 2 years. So even if Kosovo is not accepted by next year, it does not mean this is a negative reaction. It's just a matter of time. So also here, please consider that you put this in the right political context. It's not a saying against Kosovo. It's just a regular procedure, which is not unusual. So much from my side. I'm very grateful that you have agreed, that many people have stayed until the very end. And I like Flutura's saying that it is important to speak to each other. I would say let's do a similar webinar in this composition with very interested people, maybe in 4 or 6 weeks again. I think this could be helpful. Maybe we get even somebody from the EU institution, somebody from either Lajčák or from the ESS who can maybe reflect a little bit more on what their initiatives will look like. I will keep you posted. Thanks a lot for your interest, and have a safe evening, and hopefully we see each other in a very peaceful environment soon on the ground in Kosovo. Thank you, Agon. Thank you, Flotura. Thank you, Direksha.
Thank you, Viola. Thank you.
Bye-bye.